I'm back to answer more of your questions. So, here we go. I hope you're enjoying these. If you are, go ahead and hit the subscribe and the like button. From Joey, I have always been curious of what a regular work week looked like on a show such as The Waltons. For example, when the cast received a script, how much time did you have to prepare before shooting scenes? Always love the show. Thank you, Joey. We would get the script anywhere from maybe a week at the most before we started filming an episode. We would spend 6.5 days filming an episode. We did not shoot on weekends, so Monday through Friday, so we were always kind of rolling shows over midweek. And if we had a show where we were on the half day, so let's say on Wednesday at midday we finished the first episode, and then we would go right into, the next director would step on set and we'd go right into scenes for the next episode. So anywhere from maybe a week out to a couple of days out. There was, I think, one occasion even when they asked us to start filming when we hadn't even seen the script because they were still doing rewrites on it, so we were just given scene pages. Fortunately, that only happened once because that makes it incredibly difficult because you don't even know what the whole story's about. We'd get it when we got it, I'd read it, we'd have as many days as we had to prepare, plus we were still filming. But the good news was with a show like The Waltons is we didn't have to study the character. We didn't have to do all the research and background work that you do when you are doing a character you've never done before. We had lived the history of it, so we knew the relationship between the brothers and sisters and the family, and anybody who was a guest star, that was going to be a new relationship, so we were going to discover that. So that was kind of the prep we had. We would get a shooting schedule that would tell us, like, on Monday, these are the scenes, this is the location, we're going to be, on the back lot at the house, this day we're going to be on the set and we're going to shoot these scenes. So we'd have a rough idea of the breakdown of when scenes were happening. So if I had a particularly heavy episode where my character had a lot to do, I'd know which days were particularly intensive, either because I had a lot of dialogue or because I had a lot of emotional work to do. So I would plan accordingly. If I had a lot to do in a show, I would spend more time preparing as far ahead as I could, a couple days before. I would do a lot of work the night before, making sure I knew all of the dialogue. But the fact is, I wouldn't learn it much before the night before because the next day I was filming things, and if they weren't the things that I'd been looking at the night before, then I might not remember the things from the night before or 2 days later. So it was kind of a day-to-day thing. Each person would have had their own experience of what they needed to do to be fully prepared. So they might tell you something different for their preparation. This from Gary. I heard Earl Hamner speaking about how his real-life grandmother was sweet, but Ellen balked at that, telling him he had an entire Walton family of sweethearts and some crustiness would be needed. She was right, Earl realized. While The Waltons, I'd say, is a perfectly written show true to character development, nevertheless, was there a plot turn for Mary Ellen that you objected to or felt was not right for her? And might you have had any small input in redirecting her with a certain situation? For the most part, no. Most of the time, I was perfectly fine with everything that was happening, and I loved the writing of the show and felt that what was happening with my character made perfect sense. Some storylines were more fun for me than others, but in terms of the show, I understood. The only point when I went to the producers, and I think went to Earl, was after Kurt was killed at Pearl Harbor, and I had John Curtis, and there was a point where I wasn't really doing anything, and I kind of said to Earl, I said, Mary Ellen was this great, rebellious character who wasn't going to conform. She wasn't going to lead a traditional life. She wasn't going to get married and have a child and just be a mother. That was what she always professed. I said, now all of a sudden that's what I'm doing, and I feel like that's not really true to the character. And it was not too long after that I got the storyline where Mary Ellen decided she was going to become a doctor, and she fought to, be admitted to medical school. So I think that was inspired by me pointing that out and fortunately getting some agreement and then redirecting where my character was going. But I could be wrong. They might have already had that in the works and I'm taking credit for something that had nothing to do with me. But either way, I'm awfully glad that my storyline took that turn and gave me something really to sink my teeth into. Next question. How did you cope with being recognized by tons of people everywhere you went back when the show was huge? And today, are people surprised to see Mary Ellen strolling down the street? Well, back when the Waltons was at its most popular, I did get recognized a fair bit, but in Los Angeles, it was a little different because the show wasn't as popular in Los Angeles as it was in other parts of the country. And I think people are also more used to seeing celebrities in the LA, Hollywood, Beverly Hills area. Although people might recognize me, sometimes they didn't place it. It was like, oh, you look familiar. Do I know you? Do you, work at such and such bank? Or do you have kids at such and such a school? So it was a little different then. Rarely, it also wasn't the type of show that elicited screaming, squealing fans. We weren't teenage heartthrobs or, we weren't the Beatles or, so we didn't elicit that kind of response. Usually it was like, oh, it's so cool. I love your show. Can I have your autograph or that type of thing? Sometimes, like at school, people made fun of us, most of the cast, because the Waltons just wasn't cool in the 70s if you lived in LA. And teenagers, of course, are nothing if not trying to be cool. So when I was in school, it was like, oh, good night, John boy, they'd make fun of me. So dealt with that when I would go other places, then, there would be a lot more excitement about, oh, the cast is coming to do some sort of publicity thing. And that was, that was kind of fun. You were like, oh my goodness, the show's really popular, because we didn't necessarily know until we got out there, because we didn't interact. We didn't have a live audience, so we didn't get to interact with fans a lot unless we went out and did publicity. So if we did a parade and people were like squealing and screaming, it was like, oh wow, hey, this is kind of cool, I guess the show's popular. As the years went by and we were a little further removed from it, I got recognized less. Some people think I look the same. Some people think I look a lot older, which of course I am. I don't necessarily expect to get recognized a lot now from the Waltons unless it's a Walton related function. But I do still occasionally, and people are usually very, very nice about it. So, it's quite lovely in general. Few people have asked this question. Do you or any other cast member that you're aware of have a souvenir of the show? If so, who and what? Not really for me. The only thing that I ended up with accidentally really was my sort of wedding ring, Mary Ellen's wedding ring. I think it ended up like sometimes I'd be wearing it and I'd end up taking it home, and somehow at the end of the series, it must have been in my bag or something, and I ended up taking it. For the most part, the props and the clothes belonged to the company, or they were part of stock at Warner Brothers Studios, the property department or the wardrobe department. So it never occurred to me that they were mine to ask for or to take. I know Mary McDonough asked and took a couple pieces of clothing from Aaron, and there might have been, some of the others might have taken something, been given something to take. I know that in the Walton Museum in Schuyler, Virginia, there are a number of articles from the show, and some of those are from the cast, and some of them I'm not quite sure where they were dug up for or donated from. So there's stuff floating around. I'm just not sure who has what. Thank you for joining me on this segment of Behind the Scenes of the Waltons, Ask Judy. I'll see you next time.